Hi, this is Aaron Miller, and today we're going to talk about the Lawyers with Purpose Client-Centered Software Medicaid Qualification Worksheet Module. What is really neat about this software is it can help you figure out whether or not a client is currently qualified, or what they might need to do to get qualified. And it will help you show them that they may not need to wait 5 years before they can be eligible for Medicaid. To start the Medicaid Qualification Module, go to the Asset Protection Analysis interview and double-click on it. Then start a new answer file. And decide which part of the interview you want. You can generate a Medicaid Qualification Worksheet, an Asset Protection Analysis letter, which is a letter that you would send clients or financial advisors on what you could do for them or their clients. You can do an asset risk analysis and a funding roadmap. Then let the software know that you would like to assemble the documents when you're finished inputting the data. Next, type in whether your client is an unmarried man, woman, or married. Next, select whether this is a Medicaid pre-planning or crisis case. And if we are doing Medicaid planning, what the projected monthly nursing home costs will be. Then select who do you think will go into the nursing home first, and then whether or not that person is eligible for VA benefits or not. Next, select what state you're in. I'm going to run this demonstration based on Texas's numbers, but you can do this for any state. These Medicaid numbers are inputted in the default answer, and you can change them or change the defaults whenever you want to. Now we'll input the health insurance costs for the institutionalized spouse. Our example only has Medicare Part B, so we'll put $104.90 in there now. If the applicant does have any other health insurance, you can add that in as well. You put the personal needs allowance in Texas at $60. If your housing or utility allowance are applicable, you can put those in next. In Texas, we're a maximum state on the monthly maintenance needs allowance, or triple M&A, so we input that and the maximum triple M&A. But if you are in a range state, you can just select range and input the maximum and minimum triple M&A, and the software will automatically calculate the triple M&A for you. If your regional divisor is based on a daily amount, you can click that and input the daily amount. If you have a monthly divisor, you select that and input your monthly divisor. Our individual resource allowance is $2,000. Now we are a range state when it comes to the community spouse resource allowance, so click on that. But if you're in a maximum state, select that. Next is our life insurance exemptions. Typically, life insurance exemptions are based on the face value of the policy, but some states do use cash value, so you can input the amount of the exemption and what it's based on now. Everything on this page can be set in the defaults. So once you've got them set, you can just update them whenever the numbers change, or if maybe you have a client that has health insurance expenses that are more than just Medicare Part B. Next, we put the monthly income. First is the well spouse, or the spouse we anticipate will be the well spouse. Then we put in the sick spouse's income. Here we will use $1,200 and $1,500. Then we put in how much the well spouse will need to live off of once the sick spouse goes into the nursing home. Now if it's too high, the software will warn you that they will have to make up the difference from their assets. Here we will say they are pretty frugal, so they'll only need $1,500. The next question is whether we anticipate the client will be eligible for the rehab Medicare benefits. If the client has long-term care insurance, the software will take that into account when making its calculations. Here we will say no and move on to the next screen. Next is the exemptable asset information for joint assets and assets owned by the community spouse. If the client has an annuity, we can input it here. If you want to convert it to an income stream, you have the option of indicating that. If you do, it will ask you what the monthly payment will be. Next is retirement assets. Let's say the client has a $200,000 IRA. You can exempt it if you're in a state that allows for exemptions for retirement benefits. You could convert it into a monthly income, in which case the software will ask you for the monthly RMD, and if you do that, the software will give you the option to do an analysis on whether it makes sense to cash out the IRA and take the tax hit, or convert it into an income stream. For now, we will say that it is a countable asset. Next, put the value of the client's home in. You can choose to exempt it, or you can use a life estate. The software will give you a life estate table so it can factor the value of the gift. Now I'm going to leave this blank to show you what happens when you forget to input something later on. Next, put any other real estate that the client has. Then put in the face value, cash value, and death benefits of any life insurance policy. Now we'll say they have one car with a value of $15,000 and we'll exempt it. Now here on the next screen, we will enter other assets that are joint or the community spouses. We have cash, so I'll enter $30,000 here. We will say they have no savings bonds, but they have $150,000 invested. Maybe they have a Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley investment account. Now that's the only assets we have for this spouse. They have no previous transfers in the last 5 years, but if they did, we would input that information and the software will take that into account when it's doing its calculations. Now we do the same thing for the institutionalized spouse's assets that are in their own name. In this case, we won't add anything and just click Next. On this screen, let's say the institutionalized spouse has $80,000 in a separate bank account. Now we'll click Next. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because on this screen we can select which assets we can exempt. Now in this case, because the clients have a low joint income, the asset to income rule comes into play, which would allow us to protect much more than they normally would otherwise be able to protect. Now because this is a range state and we're doing pre-planning, we can select what we want the software to use as a community spouse resource allowance. If you select the minimum, then that's what you will leave the client with, and you know that the client will be eligible immediately without any additional planning when they go into the nursing home. Or you could select the maximum CSRA and explain to the client to come see you before they go into the nursing home so that you can complete their planning. Basically, you would be doing a crisis plan with the assets they have in a revocable living trust or in their own name. Or you can decide to use some other number for the CSRA. Maybe you know they need an extra $15,000 per year from their assets. You could add 15,000 times 5 to the minimum CSRA and know that they will be below the minimum range in 5 years because they would have spent it down each year. So in this case, we will pick the minimum CSRA for now. Then we will get to select which assets we want to exempt. The software tells us that the CSRA is $23,184 and that the individual resource allowance is $2,000. Now normally we would be able to exempt $25,184 in this case, the CSRA plus the individual resource allowance. But because of the asset to income rule, we can exempt up to an additional $950,160, which would bring the total exemptable amount to be $975,344. Now the software allows us to pick which assets we want to exempt and how much of it we want to exempt. In this particular case, because the amount that we can protect is so high, we will be able to exempt all of their assets. Now watch the balance to allocate. After I put in how much of the home we are going to exempt and hit Tab, it updates how much of the exemption that I have left that I could use. So if we were in a situation where we could not exempt all of the assets, this would help us keep track of how much we have left. Now we will just finish out exempting the rest of the assets and move on to the next screen. Now this is the spend down screen. This allows you to choose from different spend downs and how much you want to allocate towards them. Maybe the client needs to do some home improvement or buy a new car, or perhaps they need to buy a funeral. They're definitely going to need legal fees, and a lot of clients have debt that could be paid down. You can also input taxes or anything else that the client wants to purchase for themselves. Here we'll go ahead and put in legal fees. Pay off some debt. And purchase a funeral. Next, we will address that asset protection opinion letter. We can send it to the client's adult child, the financial advisor if they were the one that asked for it, or maybe the caseworker. Then we input who the letter is regarding, the address information, the signing information, and the drafter. Then we hit Next. Now, remember I left that one blank back at the life estate? This shows us that we have one unanswered question left. So we'll go back and fix that. We will jump to the next unanswered question, but there is none. Now we will hit finish and save it. The forms are now generating. Now I've cut some of the time from this, but the generation of the forms is really fast. So here we see the Asset Protection Analysis Opinion Letter, the Asset Risk Analysis, the Funding Roadmap, and most importantly, the LWP Qualification Worksheet. And if we had done an IRA analysis, that would be generated as well. So this is the LWP Medicaid Qualification Module. If you have any questions, or if you would like to have a one-on-one in-depth demonstration, go to www.letstalklwpsoftware.com to set up an appointment.